I love doing that. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's program of the Commonwealth Club, in the place where you're in the know. You can find us online at commonwealthclub.org, on Facebook and Twitter, and on our YouTube channel as well. I'm Joseph Fink, the President Emeritus of Dominican University of California, the former Chairman of the Board of the Governors of the Commonwealth Club, and also the former Chairman of the Board of the Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame, which this evening is enshrining 5 of our new members at a place across town. I chose to be here rather than there because of the intellectual athleticism and the grace and charm and wit of the man sitting near me is greater than all of those 5 athletes put together. Willie Brown is the legendary Speaker of the California Assembly, one of the best mayors this city ever had, and an advisor to presidents and governors for a number of decades. Currently, he heads the Willie L. Brown Jr. Institute of Politics and Public Service and writes a column for the San Francisco Chronicle. Ladies and gentlemen, Willie Brown.
Thank you, Joseph. Since I accepted the invitation in 2004 or 5 to come to the Commonwealth Club and talk about the city and the county and the state and the nation and the world. I accepted that invitation at a time when I was in recovery from public service. I assumed that it would be a 1-year deal and that I would be, of course, completely rehabilitated and no longer in need of being present with a whole lot of people that are smarter than I am, that are better informed, that have opinions where they take no risk in sharing them. But I'm still here. I have not gone away. I must tell you that coming to visit with you in this day and age, in this time period, since 2016, it's been different from anything that I have ever experienced. It was July of 2008 when I finally agreed to do a column for the San Francisco Chronicle. It was about the time that Obama was about to defeat Hillary without the help of the Russians. So it was an interesting time. Can you imagine how confused they must have been? Do we do the black guy? Do we do the woman? Subsequently, it was no problem for them a few years later. They knew exactly what they should do. But the Chronicle asked, and had gone back and forth with the idea of a column, because I had been very friendly with and a pal. I think I was named as a correspondent in one of his 2 or 3 divorces. When he ran around with me so much that his wives thought we had a relationship that would have potentially landed us on the cover of Time. As you will see when you see your next Time magazine, the new First Family is on the cover of Time. Buttigieg and his husband are on the cover of Time magazine. That's amazing that we've come that far since 2008. And I must tell you that I just anticipated that in 2008, and Obama would get elected in November of 2008, and I would probably write one or two more columns, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that would be it. But they won't let me go either. I'm still doing a column for the Chronicle, and so tonight you may get a little bit of Sunday's column, or you may give me some idea about what ought to be in Sunday's column. In the meantime, I'm going to talk a little bit about the city, but probably more about the nation. It's awfully hard to get away from what the nation is doing. You know, we had the situation yesterday of Roseanne Barr in drag. Showing up to answer questions. And in the process, it was great entertainment. And nothing was more impressive, frankly, than how it all unfolded, almost as if it was scripted. Or our great senators on the Democratic side of the aisle seemed not exactly prepared initially. They seemed to be hesitant. They thought the new lights at the Commonwealth Club, which bothers the hell out of me, was bothering them because there were obviously lots of lights going on there. But it was kind of amazing in that the senator from Hawaii got off her lines, and we were waiting patiently. Dick Durbin, I thought, would get off his lines, but this guy, this Barr guy was really tap dancing. He was really doing a great job of representing his client, his only client, and clearly looking to survive that job that the client gave him, and that had been approved by the U.S. Senate. Well, as things unfolded with at least three people running for the presidency, you knew that there had to be an opportunity for each of them to really display how competitive they could really be if they were actually in the seat of the presidency. Well, I must tell you that San Francisco, obviously in California, obviously was blessed because Kamala Harris ended up being almost at the end of the line, because they do it by seniority for purposes of questioning. Has nothing to do with skill, ability, and what have you. And it's clear that all the questions on the Democratic side should have been turned over to her. She should have cross-examined him like the pedophile that he appears to be on some occasions. They really should have really gone after him, but they couldn't. They couldn't lay, I mean, it was amazing. It was almost like they couldn't lay a glove on him until they got to her. Now, he clearly had no exposure to how deadly she can really be. And when it comes to question and answer, she has been doing it for years, and she was a premier trial lawyer in the district attorney's office over in Alameda, and she had developed a whole reputation of, if you were in courtroom with Kamala Harris, people did what they do here when they come to see me. They wanted to see her literally cross-examining people, because she would literally cut them to shreds. And she would do so in a way in which it was respectful within the content and within the rules. And obviously, Roseanne never figured that she would be able to do anything to him. He was almost too smug by the time it got to her. And when she started giving him those ups and downs and those ups and downs, and always just say, answer yes or no, answer yes or no, answer yes or no. Well, is there anything you don't want to know about Kamala? You don't want to have to be in a position where you got to answer yes or no. That's out of the question. Because she don't care which way you answer, it's not going to be the right answer. And that's what he didn't figure. And so she really, literally, so wiped the floor in that brief period of time she had with him that it caused him to know that he needs to go into recovery. He cannot go back before the Congress. And I hope the Congress is wise enough, if they really want to do really an effective job of determining whether or not this report contains sufficient information for purposes of initiating the action that could lead to the ultimate demise of Trump. They're going to have to do the job of subpoenaing him, knowing that he's not going to honor the subpoena, going to court, getting a contempt of court and a contempt of Congress in one fashion or another, and sending the U.S. Marshal to pick him up and bring him in, and he won't have his cell phone on. You told him to turn those damn things off, didn't you? So it should be an interesting next few days, because suddenly what was kind of an overshadowed campaign, a campaign that started out spectacularly in the early part of the year, it literally had become complacent in our perspective only because there are so many. I think there are now almost 23 or 24 people running. And apparently, there must be some value in running that I can't perceive. Because if you have no possibility of winning, you know, that governor of Washington has no possibility of winning. You can't run a campaign using Greyhound bus as your means of transportation in order to get around the country. You just can't. It doesn't work that way. And there are a whole number of those people that have no possibility of winning. Each one of you in this room got a better possibility of winning because not enough people know who you are. They might be impressed, but these people are known, and it's, you know, so it's kind of weird. But I know that it won't be long before one after another they will start bailing out, and when they do, we'll have probably a 5 or 6 person playoff, so to speak. And the 5 or 6 person playoff, I know you're wondering, who do I think will ultimately win? I must tell you that I'm not sure anymore because, you know, Biden is soaring at the moment. I don't know whether or not he will be able to maintain that because he has not been able to maintain it in 2 or 3 other attempts to become the president. And it's hard for me to embrace anyone who has lost consistently. And I suspect that will be the same experience that many other people will have in this country. I do, however, think that the ticket for this Democrat this time around, for the Democrats this time around, will have to have a woman. Clearly have to have a woman on the ticket. Hillary should have been the president. There is no question Hillary should have been the president. But the purists decided they could not allow themselves, for fear of being rejected somewhere, they couldn't allow themselves to go vote for somebody who was not as pure as they were. And so they didn't vote. And as a result of not voting, Donald Trump, with fewer than a majority of votes in the race itself, won by picking off 3 or 4 states in which that collection of purists had failed to show up and just cast a vote for Hillary, and we would not have the problems we have with the presidency. And so I am still livid that crowd of purists would chance it even this time around. And that disturbs me because they are not nearly as impressive as they were. They really should take an opportunity to study what occurred in 2018 when Nancy Pelosi decided that the U.S. Congress needed her back as the new head of that body. She put together a program throughout this nation, and she said to every Democrat, you fit or you don't fit. And believe me, if you don't fit, I'm going to tell you you don't fit. And I am not going to tolerate and have anyone else tolerate supporting you if you don't fit your constituency, not the constituency fitting you. And lo and behold, the results were spectacular. She won and put us in a position where at least we can participate in the public policy making of this nation, somewhat akin to what was done in 2010 when Obama was first in and when Nancy Pelosi led the effort to produce the Affordable Care Act, which covers many people in this nation in a way in which they have never been covered. And so if you read my column several columns ago, and I know that I'm right on this, it should be Nancy Pelosi for president. And that would solve everybody's problem. But Nancy doesn't want the job. She really thinks she has a better job than the presidency, and I'm sorry to see that she has made that decision, but it would be fabulous if Nancy Pelosi was a candidate. All of those people that did not show up probably would have difficulty not showing up if Nancy's name was on the ballot, and she would know exactly who they were. I'm saying that's how talented she really is. It reminds you of Phil Burton. Phil Burton knew everybody's district in this country better than they knew that district. And Nancy is holding the seat that Phil Burton once held, and she's holding the job that Phil Burton really wanted but couldn't get because he couldn't put the tools together as Nancy has put the tools together. So there's still hope. I can imagine Nancy had been responsible, frankly, for Obama gaining the advantage of becoming the nominee in the dust up in 2008. It was Nancy and the superdelegates. Nancy led the superdelegates that got him the nomination. She has not evidenced any interest in any of the 23 or 24 so far. And I suspect that that's one of the reasons why newcomers keep popping up. They see that Nancy is still available, and they keep just hoping, and we all are in that category. And Nancy and will obviously be here at some point, and I hope you will press her to run, because I do think that there is a distinct possibility that all she'd have to do would be to announce, and it would be all over. Everybody would fold, and Trump would start almost instantly seeking help from somebody because he fears Nancy more than he fears anybody else. There is no other person to whom he has had a confrontation he didn't call them a name. And until yesterday, Kamala was in that same category. Now he's given her a name. And he is upset with the fact that she, frankly, unmasked and undressed the bar person in a fashion that Trump didn't think his champion and his representative could be so undressed. And so he now knows that he's got to keep Barr at home. Otherwise, it may very well become apparent to everybody that without Barr, there would be no Trump. And we are clearly eager to see that that is, in fact, the result. In the meantime, the state of California is in better shape than it has been in a long time. Gavin Newsom, the former mayor of our great city, is now the governor of the state of California. You know, it's kind of unbelievable that what you have in this state in terms of elected officials. Just think about it. From San Francisco, no, let's start with the two U.S. senators. From San Francisco, Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. From San Francisco, the man who runs the governorship, Gavin Newsom. From San Francisco, the woman who is the lieutenant governor, Eleni Koloakos. It is just incredible that we would have that group of talent. But they think very quickly, who's the treasurer? Fiona Ma from here in San Francisco. Who's the controller? Betty E, right here from San Francisco. It's just awesome that so many of the state elected officials, national and local, are literally from San Francisco. I frankly feel sorry for Los Angeles. They have so many more people down there, but apparently the entry fee or the intelligence requirement is in excess of what kind of talent they have, and we're ended up with smaller numbers, but with obviously better talent, and we are providing great political leadership for the state of California by virtue of the kind of people that we have managed to elect to public office. And with Gavin at the helm on the governorship side, as soon as he finishes getting even with Jerry Brown for all the things Jerry Brown did when he served as lieutenant governor, Jerry didn't pay a whole lot of attention to Newsom. I'm not sure, frankly, that anybody told Jerry that there was a lieutenant governor. I'm not sure he knew it, but because he conducted himself as if there was no lieutenant governor. He would seldom, if ever, leave the state, and that's when the lieutenant governor gets a chance to shine. He would seldom, if ever, include the lieutenant governor in anything that he was doing. So I'm not sure he knew that there was a lieutenant governor or cared. When Newsom, obviously, has been just biding his time until he could get the job. And as soon as he got the job, first thing he did was every toy that Jerry Brown had and built and everything that Jerry Brown put in place, Newsom knocked them all down. He just went in and knocked them all down. He's now slowly but surely, however, charting the course in a way in which we are going to see Newsom rise and do what needs to be done for the 39.9 million people, 39,900,000 people that are now in the state of California, particularly since it appears as if lots of folk are leaving. Some people are thinking about, a friend I talked to today had just moved to Texas. Now, I tell you, I don't understand why anybody would move to Texas. I left Texas for a very good reason. There is nothing redeeming about Texas. My relative group have slowly but surely dwindling down because they're all leaving Texas as soon as they possibly can. But when my friend told me he had moved to Texas and told me where in Texas, I didn't have it hard to tell him that, I feel sorry for you. I don't know what would have prompted you. And when he started outlining to me that he had retired, and I knew right off, okay, you got a problem, because Texas is not, there's no advantage for a retired person in Texas. The income flow is not subject to taxations if you're working. But if you're there, on Social Security and a teacher salary, a teacher retirement, there's no advantage because your taxes on the real estate side, your property taxes are equal to the property taxes in the state of California. There's an advantage on the gas side, but then there's also the burden of bad air, almost as a result of cheap gas in Texas with no, and then the social relationships in Texas are virtually non-existent. So it's just an odd thing to be moving to Texas. But people are moving in some other places as well. But yet we have an incredible growth curve in California. And we particularly have a growth curve in Northern California and a growth curve in San Francisco, California. As I walked around today just to check things out before coming here to see how much development is going on and how many new places are being built, it's unbelievable how many spaces are being built in San Francisco. It's also kind of unbelievable to see how many vacancies there are on the retail side. When I was in Chinatown, I counted 37 vacancies between that part of Chinatown from, say, Powell to, say, down to maybe Davis, and then from about Market Street or to about Broadway. That's the territory that I covered. And there are 37 vacancies in that particular piece of town. When I said that early today to someone before coming here, I said 37 vacancies in Chinatown. He said, are you kidding me? There are 37 vacancies in Union Square. An incredible number of vacancies in our city. And it is not because people don't want to use those facilities. It's because there's an alarming amount of attention to trying to get as many dollars as you can out of the rental market on the side of these landlords who own these buildings. I recall that when I first arrived in San Francisco, the first time I ever ate a steak in my life was at a restaurant on Powell Street called Tad's, and it was $1.09 for a steak. And with that steak, you got a salad, and you got some, I think it was called French bread in those days, with what appeared to be working crude oil on it for toast purposes. But it was really good. And that place is still there. Tad's still there. And when I was talking to them earlier today, they said they're moving. I said, why are you moving? They said they want to raise our rent. I said, so where are you moving to? We're moving to a city garage around on Ellis Street across from John's Grill. And I said, I don't want to, get in your business, but what kind of rent are you currently paying? So we're currently paying about $25,000 a month. Well, how in the hell would, obviously when they're going around the corner, how much did they ask you for? $60,000 a month. That's $2,000 a day. Now, they have obviously raised the price of that steak. It's now $18 when I saw it in there today. It's $18 for that steak, and that's still considered, a reasonable price steak for some people. But I'm just amazed, and that's just one example of the alarming and the dramatic movement on the side of people who control real estate. And I must tell you that it didn't surprise me that the Board of Supervisors has considered the possibility of beginning to tax vacant spaces on retail spaces in the city, because those spaces are obviously there not because there isn't a tenant potentially, but rather there is because there is an alarming increase in the cost associated with occupying that space for service purposes. And it's all because the dramatic increase in the number of people who are here in San Francisco that eat out. San Francisco is increasing its commitment to no kitchens. The business of not eating at home, apparently home cooking is highly overrated, and that more people are having it either sent in by robot, or they are going to the places where the food is prepared. My friend Stanley Gaddy has he calls a grocery store over on Post Street. But the best fried chicken in town is prepared every day at Stanley Gaddy's joint, and the best chicken pot pie, other than from when you get it up at the Big Four, is at Stanley's joint on Post Street, and he sells out every day. And that's because all those people living in and around there don't want to bother to cook. They don't want to do any of the things that need to be done. And I think Stanley is not totally and candidly represented, because he's saying no possibility of gaining any weight eating my food. And it's probably true, because the prices he's charging you're not going to eat too often. And that obviously would be a contribution to what you mean. But it is clear that if we could very much get ourselves in gear, we could begin to get some kind of a balance in the occupancy rate of retail spaces in San Francisco, and we clearly need to do that. Simultaneously, London Breed is our new mayor, and she's doing a spectacular job. In spite of the fact that somebody yesterday in the Chronicle, I don't know why they did this, but the letter to the editor said, now that the Reskin is leaving the job of Muni, that job ought to go to Willie Brown. Now, you know, as somebody who really dislikes me, apparently, because Muni it's almost impossible to operate it anyway. And if you recall, I made the bold statement in pursuit of the job of mayor that in 100 days you would be able to have Muni show up at your home on your demand and deliver you wherever you need to go, because I was going to fix Muni. Well, Muni is still unfixed, and that was about 25 years ago when I made that comment. And it's clear that whoever said I should be running Muni without the lunch. Well, London obviously didn't call me up and say, I like the idea, will you consider it? As a matter of fact, she didn't call me up at all, which kind of disturbed me, because it should have at least generated some attention. But nevertheless, she is in the process of beginning the fixing Muni. I had a young man who worked for me, P.J. Johnston. He may be here tonight, but I had him over at Muni for a while, and he's still my friend, in spite of the fact that he was stuck over at Muni for a short period of time. And you know, it's like being sentenced to bad time for bad behavior to go over to Muni. But London is accepting the challenge, and she has grabbed the man who just retired from running the Bay Bridge, the Willie Brown Bridge, and all the things around here with the state and federal money. He retired. She got him yesterday, apparently, to agree to go on the Muni board. Now, if she just put one or two more people on there and reduce the influence of the Bicycle Coalition and reduce the influence of the people who apparently think it's perfectly okay to ride any kind of an instrument that has wheels anywhere in the city. I even saw a guy in a wheelchair in the middle of Market holding up the streetcars, the buses, and everything else because it was not motorized. He was rolling it, but he said, I'm entitled to the same space as any car. Well, obviously, that's the next step that needs to be taken, not Muni, but obviously the transportation system of our city and the methods needs to be done. For an example, I am next door neighbor to this place, and we look out on there, and when we have some kind of event and we do parking and we have the valet parkers, they have to go 2 blocks up before they can come back and do whatever they need to do. I, for weeks, have been telling these damn people who run the MTA, make that street behind us, Stewart Street, like it is between Market and Mission. It's 2 ways. Here, it's 1 way this way. And it's the only 1 way this way spot in the whole goddamn city. And you would think that those people who run the operation would have already made the adjustment. I'm hopeful that that adjustment will start, and I have said that you'll be able to predict how fewer cars will be circulating 2 blocks up rather than just coming around here and dropping you off and picking you up with no problem at all. All over the city, that kind of opportunity presents itself, and so the creativity that Mayor Breed and her operation is going to pursue is going to do something about changing the nature of this city. I also suggested that, and I tested it, I use cabs most of the time. I use some form of transportation assistance, and I have been critical of Uber, and in part because it was back in, well, let me tell you, I'm sorry that I am critical. I have to be critical, though, because I made a tragic mistake. It was back in 2009 or 10 when the guy who came up with the idea of Uber was chatting with me up at the St. Regis in the lobby, and he was picking my brain on how it could be implemented and should be implemented and through the regulatory process. And I, of course, told him, you got to be out of your mind if you think we already have the business of limos, and the limos seem to work very well. You make the appointment, what have you. He said, but electronically, you can instantly make the appointment and you get the pickup. I said, no, it won't work. It'll never work. And lo and behold, he hired somebody else to help him. And that somebody else is probably going to be really wealthy in about 3 or 4 months when they go public, and I'm still going to be riding Muni. All because I didn't make the decision to take advantage of the opportunity. But it's clear that almost every one of those drivers in those cars are from some other planet, not from some other city or county. They're from some other planet. And I think the recruiting for drivers, I think that the person who does the recruiting for drivers goes to whatever date they're releasing people from prison, so that you get the right to drive yourself home from prison, and you can then keep on driving. And I think it works very well. The recidivist rate is relatively low among people who become Muni drivers or Uber drivers or Lyft drivers or what have you right out of the slammer. And that seems to work very well, but it puts too many of the damn cars on the streets of San Francisco, like every third car. And when I tested Uber just recently, they say, you almost have to be a genius to follow. You get your app and you hit the app, and then it says where you're going. You tell them where you're going, and you're typing in where you're going. Well, if you don't type, and I don't type, you're stuck because Siri can't hook up with Uber. I don't know what the hell's the matter with Siri, but Siri doesn't talk to Uber, doesn't say a word to Uber. And the results are you have to have some neighbor or some friend take a look and help me out on this. You don't want to tell them you're half-assed blind, and you don't want to tell them any of that, but you do get help with Uber. And then you get an Uber, and then as soon as you get, they say, well, the car is coming. It's a Prius, and it's silver in color, and it has license plates 276. Well, you stand out looking on the corner, and there comes 4 Priuses, all with the little thing where the guy's trying to find the woman, trying to find where they go, and you're trying to figure out the license plate. It really becomes almost impossible. On the other hand, if you do flywheel, it's the cabs, the color. That's all. And all the cabs now are signing up apparently for flywheels, because in the last week or so, I've been in a cab that said veterans. I've been in a cab that says green. I've been in a cab that says, I don't know, a number of other names, but they all come under flywheel, but they're cabs. You can recognize a cab. You cannot recognize a Prius as being exactly what it is unless there's something unique. And either they should have them all the same color. I can see it now. Purple Priuses are doing the run for all of the deals that come in the city, and that would be not a bad idea. But at any rate, we clearly have too many of them on the streets. There are at least 40 or 50,000 on some days and they change the amount of the fare. You get in, and you can say, the deal was $22. Said, well, yeah, it was $22, but it's raining. And I can't do it for $22. I can up it. And lo and behold, you're paying $46 for what used to be a $22 ride. It's just that bad. You can't do that with cabs. Cabs are controlled by the meter. And the meter says what the cabs, and when I drove a cab years ago, I used to control the meter. I'd put and that way, the people who were supposed to be sharing with me didn't get a chance to share what the real fare was. But, there are ways in which I guess people are doing it even today. But nevertheless, too many of those people on the streets, and they have no idea where they're going. You'll have, sometimes they turn left, and it's a staircase. They got, and you literally, it's embarrassing to be sitting there. And then if you get in the cab and say, I changed my mind. I don't want to go to the North Beach restaurant. I want to go to Kokori's. You guys, well, where's Kokori's? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I think I can tell you how to get there. Well, no, I got to put it in my machine to tell me where I'm supposed to go. You get an argument, pretty soon you're out of the cab or you're out of the Prius, and you have to get another one because this one can't work it out. That's how awful it is, and that's terrible for our city. Just think of how many people who come out to visit from Texas trying to figure out how to go through this process, and lo and behold, they cannot do it. So there are some things that need to be done. Or in your airport, I mean, it's terrible. We have a collection of people who have said at the airport, the only taxi cabs that can pick up at the airport, on Eleanor, you know this, only taxi cabs that can pick up at the airport are ones who pay $250,000 for their ability to drive a cab. Now, you understand, when I served as mayor, I gave out 500 of those items. Those, I think they called them, you got it, you own one probably. That's why you know what it is. You literally, I gave out 500 of them, and I think they were about $50 a copy. Some of my successors came along and said, it's not enough, nor is it enough money to get from each one of them. We're going to issue as many as you want at $250,000 for each one. And then the city did something unusually strange. Unusually strange. Now, it is just a piece of paper. That's all the medallion is. It's just a piece of paper. It's an authorization to drive. This city literally said, we want $250 for it, and we're not going to carry the note because we don't trust you. So you go to a financer and you get the $250. You give us the money that you got from the financer, but you pay the financer. And that's how you pay it back. Absolutely outrageous. Because what they also said is, those 500 that Willie Brown gave out, you can sell those to the new people that want to pay $250, because the city gets 50 out of each one that's sold. Horrible. And we didn't know about it. At least I didn't know about it. I would have, raised unholy hell, because there's no reason in the world why a piece of paper that should not require pledging your mother-in-law or your firstborn for security, because after all, if you give me a medallion and I don't pay this month, you just take the damn medallion back and give it to somebody else. It should not be some credit card or credit union supplying the money, because now there's a lawsuit by the credit unions, because suddenly when all these Lyfts and Ubers showed up, it created a problem, particularly since the city seems to prefer those particular operators. The city seems to tolerate. In fact, it appears as if the traffic police are friendly, or there must be cousins of theirs or something, because the only people still getting tickets for moving violations in this town are cab drivers. Those with medallions get tickets. Those with Uber get a hello and a courtesy drive and things of that nature. So the city on this particular issue is really kind of screwed up, since many of the people that paid the $250 are now finding that they can't make the money that will allow them to pay the $250. And so they are going bankrupt. They are having their homes, I think, leveled against, because literally they place themselves in jeopardy financially in order to get the $250 to buy the medallion, because the medallion was so valuable. There's just so many things that in nature that Mary Breed is going to have to deal with, that has been offered and left to her from the people that preceded her in the job. But be that as it may, the city is still in really great shape. The level of people who are contributing to the city in every way is at the zenith. And if we can just get ourselves together on the business of making housing affordable for teachers, housing affordable for hospital workers, housing affordable for the collection of people that provide the services, we will be on tap to continue the glamour and the goodness that's always been this city, in the way in which it allowed me to become one of its people who lived here, who managed to prosper here, who managed to get educated here, who managed to become productive here. Mayor Breed is dedicated to trying to get it back to that particular level, and I suspect she will, but it's going to be a real challenge because I've just outlined 2 or 3 of the challenges that is faced. And I know somebody is already saying, well, how would you address that problem of the medallions that were bought? First and foremost, it should be clear. Any medallion given out by the city cannot be sold for profit by anybody who has that medallion. That should have been the rule to begin with, because after all, it's a city item, and you should have been required to return it if you no longer wanted to use it. That's just the way it should have been, and we would have been much better off. There are multiple opportunities of that nature and things of that nature that must be addressed, and I think Mayor Breed is going to have the job of so addressing it. My time's up?
Whatever you want.
Yeah, I really had told Joe and others that tonight I was going to come and just answer questions because I know all of you have questions that I was not going to make a speech of any sort, and I frankly didn't make a speech of any sort. I just shared with you the meandering of my mind. And you got a demonstration on how the columns come. They just come. There's no plan, no program, and they don't come, they come sometimes at unusual moments. 4:30 in the morning, you flip on the television, and there's usually it's worse TV in the world between about 2 a.m. And 4:30 a.m. Nothing is on TV. I mean, it's just terrible. And there's nothing on radio. Ray Taliaferro died, and there's nothing left on radio during the course of that time period. And you start to think. And when you start to think, that's dangerous. Because it can be uncontrolled. Nobody is there to help guide you and what have you. But it ends up being a lot of fun because it's a real challenge to the people who do the editing over at the Chronicle because they some days thinks I should be committed as a result of something that I have said or done. It's fun, frankly, because I now know that they are annoyed if they have to go through a lot of verbiage. They only want to give me about 1,000 words. I'd like 2 pages. But they will not permit me to do so, and it limits me demonstrating my genius. Thank you very much.
Our thanks to Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, noted political commentator, and the potential transportation czar for San Francisco. I remember about 15 years ago when we started to do this, I asked you what you're going to miss most about being mayor. And you looked at me and said, the driver. I thought you were kidding at the time, but now after the last 5 minutes, I understand a little more. All right, most of the people here that I talked to earlier want to talk about national politics, but there are a couple of things that...
See, I knew that. That's why I started talking national politics. Right. I know none of you give a shit about bad driving and unfair treatment of cab drivers.
All right, there are a couple issues about local and state politics that we probably should address, though. One of them is the fact that the city is changing. The skyline's changing. The composition of the population of the city is changing. It's becoming, in the eyes of many, a city that's starting to follow the patterns of Manhattan, where you're either very rich or you're very poor, and if you're in the middle class or the artistic and cultural community, you're being forced out because of the expense of living and being here. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that those who recognize that as a potential should become a participant in trying to make sure it doesn't become a reality to the extent that waiters no longer can live in the city. Servers can no longer live in the city. Teachers can no longer live in the city. I think that Mayor Breed and members of the Board of Supervisors are conscious of it, and I think that they do intend to address the issue in a very aggressive way, because the affordable housing advocates have been around here for a long time. I refer to them as running kind of a cartel. They're the ones that run the operation where they build for the poorest. They do not build housing for everybody. They have no interest, apparently, in doing that because they are so riveted on trying to build for the poorest of the poor. Well, certainly the poorest of the poor need housing. I built a lot of housing in that category. But simultaneously, there really ought to be a heavy-duty commitment to produce housing. I said to a young man who just got elected to the City Council of Richmond, when he came in to see me, to say, "What recommendations do you have?" I said, "You have land over there. You have a lot of land in Richmond. So why don't you go to the state, and that new superintendent of schools, I think, would sign on to what I'm about to recommend. And that is the state's teachers' retirement fund is one of the largest retirement funds in the nation." I said, they tried at one time to build at 8 Washington, and they were stopped in the Ed Lee administration in an effort led by Peskin and a few other persons of that same ilk. And they killed that process. I said, it seems to me, with the kind of land you have in Richmond and the opportunity for the teacher retirement system to make money for their fund, building and owning and operating housing or financing housing, you could build a teacher village in Richmond and build it close enough to where the ferry boats move all around the bay, and teachers would be able to live in that village at least for some period of time, several years, as they transition into ability for greater ownership. And that village could be constantly repeating itself in terms of the availability. And just think of how many school districts on that regional housing complex. Think of how many school districts would sign on to that regional housing complex, and how many of the union members could begin the negotiating process, including the opportunity for the availability of that housing as to where you live for the first 5 years of your teaching career. It would be fabulous. You'd have teachers that live in Antioch, and teachers that live in Brisbane, and teachers that live in San Francisco, all reaching their living space in Richmond in the same teacher village, and at prices that would be affordable. That concept could be replicated in other places. For an example, out at the Cow Palace. Why do we need the Cow Palace? Perfect place for a new teacher village. It's just so many incredible ideas that you can pass on that way, and you would begin to address the problem effectively. You're not going to do it if you stick with this business of just thinking affordable housing, or when you build a new high-rise. Karen Johnson's clients build high-rises, and they're required to put 20% affordable. Well, that's not addressing the issue. You need, because you cannot literally have the kind of people you're talking about living in those particular facilities. They won't meet the threshold on the income side. Only somebody who's on welfare or near welfare will meet that concept. And so clearly we need to be a lot more creative, and we need to not apologize when we say not one more dedicated affordable housing we're going to build unless you redefine what you mean by affordable. If the affordable question goes out the window from what it currently is with the caps, and it goes in a different definition and a different direction, the results could be we could begin to honestly and effectively address the issue. I saw yesterday in the newspaper, or maybe it was today, where some of the most generous people, Benioffs, give another $30 million to research homelessness. Forget that. Are you kidding me? You don't need to research it anymore. We all know that homelessness is, the beginning, it begins with poverty. And so what we ought to do is take that 30 million and do some anti-poverty work, or any combination of dollars to do that. And so people have got to be courageous enough to move away from the symbolic process, but into the reality world. And the reality world is poor people need assistance. That story in the newspaper today about this person over in the East Bay who opened their home to people who had been homeless for a long time. That is a unique response, one that, I'm surprised that even allowed it to be publicized, because he's doing what many of his fellow wealthy people would never consider doing, and that is objectively and directly addressing the needs of a collective in the population. And then finally, I've got to tell you that some of these people that I bump into in restaurants that are servers there tell me that they would love to have some redefinitions of these SROs so that they could actually, for the week that they're working in downtown San Francisco and they live in, they live in wherever, Vallejo or what have you, they stay in San Francisco, occupying one of the SROs, one of the rooms at the SROs, and doing what needs to be done to help make our city what it is.
Okay, thank you. Question about the state now. FDR has 100 days. What's Gavin Newsom had so far?
Newsom has had a marvelous run. Most people have not paid any attention to him. He's been really lucky because he has not been judged adversely. And what he has been judged on, he clearly has been responsive. The whole business of wildfires, he's on top of that. Like no other space, he's actually on top of the high-speed rail process that is going on between Bakersfield and Merced. And he's actually trying to work through getting that on a practical basis to, in fact, work. And I heard today from two people who said that they no longer have to spend a week at the DMV to get an identification card. So he should be credited with having reduced the amount of time it takes you standing in line at the DMV, which is in and of itself an achievement. And he has gotten the blessings of being able to have a dramatic increase in the amount of money through the budgetary process. The one thing that Jerry Brown did was leave a lot of money because Jerry was really cheap. And as a result of being really cheap, he didn't spend a whole lot of money. He abolished redevelopment, and I think Governor Newsom will probably reestablish some form of redevelopment because the best way in which to build housing that can be workforce housing would be through the redevelopment process. He's looking at it, and he is, I think, going to address it. He's building an administration that has a lot of Jerry Brown's people in it, but ultimately they're going to be Newsom people.
Thank you. We're running out of time, so let's get to the national politics. Is it possible for Trump to get reelected?
If I had to bet today, I would tell you Trump will get reelected. That's today. There's still the opportunity to defeat him. But we Democrats are so devoted to being politically correct that we don't understand you can be really politically correct, but that ought to be the day after you win. And until we focus on that in that way, it's exactly what Nancy did in 2018. She knew that if she spent any time trying to convince folk in your district that hate Nancy Pelosi to love Nancy Pelosi, no, she wanted them to love you. And so she would allow you to say, I don't love Nancy either. I won't vote for Nancy. That's the practical way in which to ultimately win. We as Democrats need to do that. For an example, we need to tell Beto in Texas, you know, you were really impressive, but I suspect it was because your opponent was so disliked. It wasn't because of anything you stood for. You just happened to be the guy that we all wanted Ted Cruz to lose to. We didn't know anything about you. We learned about you, and we learned that you are talented. Why don't you take on this other Texan who is not as smart as Cruz, who's not as well positioned as a right winger as Cruz, but you might be able to beat him because you came close. And believe me, if he gets the support of Trump in Texas, you will beat him. But Beto is out here at the Irish Cultural Center trying to find them. Democrats don't vote at the Irish Cultural Center. I don't know what the hell, I don't know who told them to go out there. But he was out there, the Irish Cultural Center. And the same goes, you know, I saw where Bennett from Colorado, there must be something really bad in Colorado. We now got two guys, one a former governor and the other one now a U.S. Senator running from Colorado. How can that be? How can you have two people, it's not like California where we have 2 or 3 people, but they are all, you know, they are all soon to be, not have been. Those two guys have been something, and all over the country we need to, as a practical matter, say, it's not your time, Joe. You know, it's George's time, and we're going to be with George. In your state, we can't win. We're not going to waste any money in your state. We're going to put it in Texas where we might be able to win. And those are the kind of decisions we need to make sure that Trump doesn't win. Nancy has the formula for stopping Trump. I'm not sure that anyone else does. I think there's some people that could fit the formula for stopping Trump. And believe me, if they play this business with Mueller right, what they got to be careful though is because I'm almost certain that at some point you keep playing the Mueller card and it's going to prove to bounce back on you. I want to stop playing the Mueller card. I want to start doing just the obstruction of justice types. I want to issue subpoenas. I want to continuously hold hearings. I want Trump to continuously be in a defensive mode on his Russian connections and what have you. And that may be distracting enough, as it has been for the last 2 weeks, to cause us to build a volume among our people. And we have got to stop worrying about trying to change those Democrats who voted for Trump. Forget them. There are too many new people that didn't vote for anybody that we ought to be focused our attention on. New voters are literally better than, you got a better shot with them. And so I hope we won't become burdened with trying to reverse the Middle Western voters who voted for Trump. They don't have a reason not to vote for him again. You know, you think they read newspapers? Probably not. So they don't even know whether he's done anything bad.
You know, there seems to be in this country a cry for something different and new. 4 years ago, or 2 years ago, it was Bernie Sanders, and eventually became Trump. And now the newness, the new kind of different person coming to run for office. Mayor Pete from South Bend, Indiana. City of 100,000 people, smaller than Stockton, smaller than Fresno. Wants to run a nation of over 300 million people. But he's new. Can Joe Biden, or people like Joe Biden, who are moderate, skilled, experienced people, become president of the United States any longer? Or do we just want something new?
I don't think there are enough people for us to operate on the theory that only the newcomers are entitled to run. This country is such that we really ought to be about running a 50-state campaign. Every state has to be treated differently. Every pursuit, Barbara Lee says to me the other day, no, don't do it by state. Let's do it by congressional district. Nancy won because Nancy did it by congressional district. We ought to be about electing a president on the Democratic side through the business of congressional districts. That means, Joe Fink, you're responsible for your congressional district, for whomever the candidate happens to be. We did that with Diane. There was a fellow named, who's now deceased, but Van de Kamp was his name. I was the speaker at the time, and he was certain that the operation of state government was really in bad shape. As a matter of fact, he said we were a swamp, and he was going to run and clean the swamp because all of the swamp dwellers should be flushed out. We set out to get Diane the nomination, and it was after Diane's political consultant had said he was bailing out from her campaign because he said that her work ethic was not consistent with a potential winner. We set about in the legislature to say we have 80 assembly seats. We want you to be Dianne Feinstein in your district. I'll be Dianne Feinstein in mine. Other people will be Dianne Feinstein. We don't ever need Dianne Feinstein to come to the district because you're going to represent that you're Dianne Feinstein. I'm going to be Dianne Feinstein in my district. We slaughtered Van de Kamp, slaughtered him, because we ran the kind of operation in which we had our voters with us and we with them. Democrats has to do that. We'll have to do that nationwide. And if we could take the 435 congressional districts that are out there, and we could figure out 270 of those congressional districts, and we could proceed to win 270 of those congressional districts in the right way, we could end up with the presidency, and the Trumpites would never know what hit them.
Okay, thank you. There are a host of questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time, and the Commonwealth Club has over 450 events a year, and there's probably something coming into this room soon. So one last question. You were pretty good in Godfather 3. You did a pretty decent job there, I thought. Have you ever regretted not staying in the movie business and being an actor or a leading man?
I treated the world of politics as if it was a movie.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Our thanks to Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco. We also want to thank all of you in the audience here and on our television and internet. I am Joseph Fink. This meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California, the place where you're in the know, is now adjourned.